Paranormal in Pennsylvania may discuss topics such as suicide, murder, and other potentially upsetting things. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to Paranormal in Pennsylvania,
where we discuss history and haunts.
Today's story takes us to our first haunted coffee shop. I'm Sarah.
And I'm David.
Let's get into it. So today we are talking about the Abbey on Butler. Do you know where this is? Have you been there before?
I have not, no.
Really? I thought that we had been there together, but maybe I'm wrong. So, cool. You know nothing about it then. So the Abbey on Butler, it's located in the Lawrenceville region of Pittsburgh. And the original building was the Wayne Brass Foundry, and it was constructed in 1913. So it's a very historical building. It was later renovated into Henninger Funeral Home during the Great Depression.
Okay.
So you might be thinking, okay, brass, funeral home, why is it called the Abbey?
Named after a person named Abbey.
That could be. Good theory.
Great theory. Fantastic.
It operated as a funeral home for a good deal of time, and it only opened as the Abbey on Butler in 2016, which is really interesting because I always thought that it had been around longer. I just assumed.
I guess. Right? You're like, well, I would have assumed it's been there for longer. I didn't even know of its existence, so.
That's true. So the space itself is pretty cool. They have a restaurant and a separate coffee shop portion, and they have a patio portion. So it's kind of like different vibes depending on where you are within the building. The coffee shop is like relaxing, trendy, and then the restaurant is more like pubby. It's a lot of dark wood inside, and it's a really beautiful building.
Oh, cool. Love a dark wood.
Yeah. Interestingly, the Vesper Room is the name for the space that is the patio space. The company that used to occupy it was a stone carving business, which is really cool. And you can even find a carved cross in stone at one of the property corners that was uncovered during construction.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, so they really try to pay homage to the buildings that used to be there, which is nice.
So where's the brass factory aspect?
I was going to say, you're probably thinking that's stone, but what about the other two? It's interesting to me because the cross, while I assumed it was from the stone business, it could actually be from when it was a funeral home. Like, it could be a headstone.
I don't know if it's like a headstone. I mean, it could be for the funeral business, but it could also be for just when it was an abbey.
That's true. And the restaurant really wants to preserve the history and architecture of the building. The owner has said that that's very important to them. The current restaurant boasts the original wood ceilings of the building, which is, like I said, the beautiful dark wood. And during construction, the owners exposed brick walls, and they went through and had them, redone, and they've maintained them. And there are original iron elevator door panels, not from one of the places this used to be, but from another historical Pittsburgh establishment featured in the building. So while, yes, it's paying homage to what this property used to be, it's also paying homage to, like, architectural history of Pittsburgh.
Okay, so there's no elevator, just to be clear.
No, it just has the doors, like as a design element of the room.
That open to nowhere?
I don't think they open. I think they're just decorative, like on the wall decorative.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. And the Vesper Room is filled with reclaimed oak paneling and stained glass windows from a Methodist church in the Pittsburgh area. So they really sourced a lot of stuff, which is pretty cool. And I think it's interesting when considering a haunted location because we often consider the history of the location itself, but where you're pulling in these different elements like the stained glass of a church, for example, spirits can be tied to items, we know.
Yes.
So to me, it adds more possibility for hauntings. All right, time to talk about the paranormal aspects. So many of the hauntings, no surprise, seem to be tied to the funeral home era of the building. And that makes a lot of sense to me. Staff have reported seeing ghostly figures and hearing doors slam on their own after hours. And the door slamming, that one always just depends to me.
Wind, hinges, uneven flooring, take your pick. There's a lot of things that cause doors to shut. And if they're older doors that have like actual weight to them once they start. That momentum builds and they'll slam shut.
Right, exactly. So I always kind of take it with a grain of salt. Like, are their windows open? Do they normally slam? Could be paranormal, could just be physics. Who knows?
Science.
Yeah. And regarding the ghostly figures that people say that they've seen there, they're described as both shadow figures and full body apparitions. And it makes sense to me that there are spirits lingering here, given that it was a funeral home. To me, the varied presentation could be due to the fact that there are so many different spirits. What do you think?
With shadow figures, it's like there's a little bit of with that too, in the sense of like full-bodied apparitions, great, but like shadow figures, that could also just be like trick of the mind as well. But I don't know if it's... Do we know if like anybody died from the Brass Foundry?
We don't. No, there's not a ton of historical records.
Gotcha.
That's a good theory, though. I hadn't considered that. I was so leaning towards the funeral home era.
Yeah, I guess my question really is like, how many funeral homes have we covered or looked into that are like haunted? It almost feels like some people, I'm sure they are haunted, but it feels, I don't know, for some reason it feels so transient of a location of a funeral home. Yeah. That doesn't make as much sense to me versus like a brass foundry where workplace accidents and like you said
It was constructed in 1913 as the Wayne Brass Foundry.
So I'm not sure when workplace safety became a real strong place, but I don't think it was that time.
Yeah, I don't think it was in 1913. So that's a good point. So it could even be then that these shadow figures and full body apparitions are from different time periods. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or if like I had to like, I don't know, if I had to put my money to where these like spirits came from, I don't know if I'd put my money into the funeral home. It would be I think that they're workers that had unfortunately perished during their work at a brass foundry.
That's true. That's true. What's interesting to me about this is that staff have reported this. It's not necessarily just like visitors and stuff. And I guess, yeah, there could be this lore among the staff and they could be perpetuating it. But because so many different staff members have reported it, to me, it really gives it credit that it's happening.
Sure. Yeah. When you have like a lot of people that are claiming it, it's just like, it's one of those things like with the door slamming, you hear like shadow figures are like sometimes to me, because they can be like just out of the corner of your eye versus like if you have like, I don't know, like video footage or something of it.
Right. Absolutely. And I think you do have a good point about especially like the dark wood and the shadow figures. It could just be trick of the eye, depending. Not that I ever like to take away from anybody's paranormal experience, but it is always good to be skeptical.
Right. Like I am putting a skeptic side on this for sure, but that does not mean it's not occurring.
Right.
People are allowed to be wrong.
Something that I think is really interesting to me is, so it was recently a funeral home, right? People have attended funerals there and can go eat there now. So that is a wild thing that you could have had attended a funeral and now you're just going there as a restaurant.
Yeah, but I guess it depends, like, how much of an homage did they play to the funeral home? It
isn't like kitschy or anything. It really is a really nice elevated space. But I just think it would be strange you like pull up to the same location that you went to a funeral.
Yeah, but I feel like I think it depends. Because if they've done a very good job renovating the space where you walk in and it doesn't even, like the door might have been the funeral home door, right? But everything behind it is totally new, different, with some like homages to old things, but like it's totally removed. I think that it's easier to see it as a new space.
That's true. And I think they did really renovate it. So that's fair. There was one person on TripAdvisor that said, quote, "The restaurant is a former funeral home, and the friend that suggested it, his father was laid out there." End quote. And I think this could lend itself to paranormal activity because it could be the spirit of a loved one trying to engage if that was where they had their wake. you know? It just seems like a very significant emotional moment of the funeral home that you're revisiting as a restaurant. I think it just opens the door to possible paranormal engagement.
Yeah, maybe it just also really opens up the debate of where does like the spirit lie? Is it with where you're buried? Is it the funeral home? Is it where you died? Like,
can they travel?
Right.
Like, and come to you? Well, because what I'm thinking of it as is maybe the spirit is somewhat tied to that location because it was the funeral home, and then a family member presents in that location, and that kind of like calls it in more.
But so I guess the attachment to the funeral home though is the part that I struggle with. Like I might be more attached to like where I'm buried versus and like where I die than where my body gets taken.
That's a good point. I do agree with that.
This is my only struggle with it is like, is it the in transit? Because when you talk about that, then there's a lot of places that could become haunted from transiting a body.
That's true.
Whether that be, I actually don't know how they transit like bodies from like a hospital to a funeral home.
I think they have hearse ambulances that do stuff like that.
So if it's that vehicle, like, could that vehicle then be haunted because of, oh my God, transporting bodies? Yeah.
I mean, I would say yes, but I just am a firm believer that anything could be haunted. I don't think that necessarily spirits are in one given stationary location.
Sure. And for me, I'm not saying it's a no. It's a non-zero chance. I just think it's significantly less than...
likely.
Yeah, less likely than other locations.
That's fair. We have kind of seen before places that are... many people call them like portals to the other side, where it seems like there's a real uptick in paranormal activity. We saw that at Wildwood Sanitarium, where they said sometimes loved ones come through. So not necessarily a spirit tied to the location, but a spirit tied to one of the people there. And I do wonder if this is one of those places.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't been, so I can't.
Yeah.
Really can't speak to it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it would be good to go at a time when there isn't a huge crowd and you could really kind of sit with your thoughts, because again, it is a coffee shop. So you could sit with your thoughts, see if you're experiencing anything. But when it's like a Friday night or they're having one of their events at the restaurant portion, it's loud, it's boisterous. I don't think you'd be able to really, keep an eye out for paranormal activity.
So you're saying it sounds like a great time.
It is, and they do have a lot of cool events. It's a cool place. I recommend it. But would you go to eat at a restaurant where you had also attended a funeral?
I think it goes back to how much have they removed from that previous space. If it's like a restaurant that's themed as a morgue, it's probably not going to be my like super high on my list of let's definitely go there. Like especially if it was an actual like former morgue.
So it's interesting what you've said about you wonder how similar it is to a morgue, etc., because it does have this kind of gothic feel with the dark wood and the stained glass windows from that Methodist church, etc. So some people suggest that it's not at all haunted, but that it's just suggestive of a haunting or a funeral home or an old building, and that if people know the history of a funeral home, they're more likely to assume it's haunted.
That is a very good point. I mean, there is like a bias that comes with that.
There is.
Like this used to wakes and funerals were held here, so of course like there's that, could it be haunted? But again, not saying that it's not haunted, but that is a good bias to acknowledge.
Yeah, and for that reason I didn't include any of the paranormal claims that I think are strictly physical. Like creaking floors is something that people there cite as paranormal activity. And I just think with old buildings, you can never be sure.
Well, if they have the original wood floor.
I don't know if they do.
Or
they had wood paneling, ceiling.
Oh, the ceiling. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, like, building that's well over 100 years old tends to creak.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I feel like I'm being, like, negative, or, like, super negative on this, but, like, floorboard creaking is not necessarily paranormal by any means.
Absolutely. So I didn't include anything like that. But they actually have paranormal themed events here, which is really interesting that we hadn't heard of this. location.
Yeah, I'm really disappointed in you. How could you fail us like this?
How could I not find this?
Yep.
They even have an event that's 3 days long called Is It Haunted, where they have different paranormal things. They also have just like Halloween stuff that's part of that. But they seem to lean into it, which also makes me wonder if it's actually haunted or they just want it to be haunted. I feel like I'm super skeptical of this one.
It can be both. I mean,
That's
truly.
true.
And also, I'm sorry, I blamed you. The real fault is with Erica.
For
It's
not
Erica.
knowing about this.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
She drinks coffee.
that's true. We don't drink coffee.
Her fault.
But it is also a restaurant that I've been to multiple times. So,
Also your fault.
yeah. So, I don't know. The jury's out on this one for me. Would I visit this place of paranormal phenomena? Absolutely. I think in order to determine if I think it's paranormal, I would need to conduct an investigation here.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But even if... So that also brings up a discussion point of, like, what happens when we go to a place and we get nothing in our investigation, but other people do investigations of the same location and get a ton of stuff.
And that's fine. If I was presented with evidence like EVPs or abnormalities caught in media, or even just talking to someone else that we know in the paranormal community that had done an investigation here, or even anyone that we actually know personally that had a paranormal occurrence here, I would absolutely believe it. You know, I don't like to discredit people in general, but I think because we don't have any hard evidence of like someone close to us or seeing anything in media, it just makes me a little skeptical.
Yeah, that being said, it'd be really interesting to know if they have any, like, video evidence or anything that you could see or find.
Yeah, I couldn't find anything. I looked pretty hard to try to find proof, but I could not.
Which is fair.
Yeah, either way, if you're into spooky stuff, it's a good location because it used to be a funeral home. Is it paranormal? Maybe.
Until further investigation.
Until further investigation, exactly. I would love to go. Would you go overnight, do full investigation, anything that you wouldn't do?
I guess what is the category of not do? I would stay overnight, sure. I would investigate, sure. I'd go have dinner there, yeah. I'd go get a not coffee there. Like a tea or something.
So you're like all in.
Yeah, why not?
I think I am too, because even the hauntings that do allegedly happen there, they seem to be very low key. Like seeing shadow figures and apparitions, you know, hearing creaky floors, that's not anything.
Famous last words. Oh, they're like, the hauntings are like nothing. I'm gonna say that's the start of our horror movie if we do the investigation.
And then they went and no one heard from them again.
And it was in fact not fine.
Yeah. Yeah, narrator. And the report shows that was a lie. So that is the story of the Abbey on Butler, located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Very interesting history. Some variable reports of hauntings, but let us know what you think. Do you think that this place is haunted? And if you've ever been to the Abbey and had a paranormal occurrence there, please let us know because, again, we'd love a firsthand account. Any final thoughts?
No, none that I can think of at the moment.
All
Support
right.
local business, local coffee shop.
Exactly. It is a local business, so that's another reason to go. Thank you for tuning in for this week's episode of Paranormal in Pennsylvania. You can follow us on social media for behind-the-scenes content and tune in next Thursday to see what history and hauntings we discuss next. Stay spooky, my friends.